What lurks below. Daniel Matthews had always been told that the old Blackwood Forest was off-limits. Growing up in the small town of Millfield, every child knew the stories of hikers who ventured too deep and were never seen again, of strange lights that danced between the ancient trees at night, of voices that called your name when no one was there. But at 26, recently laid off and burning with the need to prove himself, Daniel saw the forest as an opportunity rather than a threat. The locals' superstitions about Blackwood Forest had created a tourist niche that nobody had tapped into yet. Daniel's plan was simple. Document the forest, create an online presence showcasing its haunted reputation, and offer guided tours for thrill seekers willing to pay premium prices to experience the supernatural. "You're making a mistake," his mother warned him over dinner, her face lined with genuine concern. "That place isn't just stories, Daniel. Something's not right about those woods." Daniel smiled and patted her hand. "Mom, it's just an old forest. All these legends are probably started by some kid who got lost once and exaggerated the story." She shook her head. "Your grandfather wouldn't even drive past that place. Said the trees watched him. That's exactly the kind of story that'll make this business work," he replied, already composing social media captions in his head. The following morning dawned misty and cold as Daniel parked his car at the forest's edge. The tourism board had reluctantly approved his request to explore and document the area, though the permit came with multiple warnings and liability waivers he had to sign. The ranger who processed his paperwork had given him a strange look. "Stay on the marked trails," she'd said, her voice tight, "and be out before sundown. No exceptions." Now standing at the trailhead with his backpack filled with camera equipment, Daniel felt the first flutter of unease. The forest before him seemed to absorb the morning light rather than reflect it. The trees, massive old-growth specimens that had somehow escaped centuries of logging, stood like silent sentinels, their branches intertwining overhead to block out the sky. "Just atmosphere," he told himself, snapping a few photos of the ominous tree line. Perfect for marketing. The main trail was surprisingly well maintained for a supposedly forbidden place. Daniel walked confidently, stopping occasionally to photograph interesting features: a peculiarly twisted tree, a small stream with water so clear it seemed almost luminous, a cluster of mushrooms in a perfect circle. The deeper he went, the more the silence pressed in around him. No bird song, no rustling of small animals in the underbrush, just the soft crunch of his boots on the path and his own breathing. After about 2 hours of hiking, Daniel reached a small clearing. At its center stood an enormous oak tree, its trunk so wide that it would take 5 people linking hands to encircle it. The tree appeared ancient beyond measure, its bark grooved and twisted, its sprawling roots breaking through the soil like gnarled fingers. Something about it drew Daniel closer. Carved into the trunk was what looked like a door, not a childish outline, but an intricately designed archway complete with a handle fashioned from a knot in the wood. The carving was weathered, suggesting it had been there for decades, yet the details remained sharp and clear. Daniel laughed nervously. "Now that's creepy," he muttered, taking multiple photos from different angles. Perfect for the website. As he circled the tree, his foot caught on one of the protruding roots, and he stumbled, dropping his expensive camera. It hit the ground with a crack that made him wince. When he bent to retrieve it, he noticed something odd, a faint vibration running through the root he had tripped over, like a pulse. Curious, he placed his palm flat against the tree trunk. The vibration was stronger there, a rhythmic thrumming that reminded him of a heartbeat. Probably some natural phenomenon, he reasoned. Perhaps water moving through the tree's core, or some kind of insect activity. The carved door drew his attention again. Up close, the craftsmanship was even more impressive. His fingers traced the intricate patterns that encircled the archway, symbols that didn't look like any language he recognized, but somehow gave the impression of meaning. The wooden handle felt warm to the touch, smoother than the surrounding bark. Without fully intending to, Daniel gripped the handle and pulled. To his shock, something gave way with a sound like a sigh. The carved door swung inward, revealing darkness beyond. A cool draft wafted out, carrying a damp, earthy smell with an underlying note of something sickly sweet. Daniel's heart raced. This was impossible. Trees didn't have hollow centers large enough for doors, especially not living ones. He fumbled for his phone, switching on its flashlight to peer inside. The beam revealed a narrow passageway leading downward, not into the tree, but into the earth beneath it. Rough-hewn steps descended into darkness, the walls reinforced with twisted roots and packed soil. Every rational part of Daniel's mind screamed at him to close the door, to mark this location on his map, and return with proper equipment, perhaps even authorities. But a stronger impulse, a burning curiosity, propelled him forward. He had stumbled upon something extraordinary, something that would make his tour business not just successful, but legendary. He took a cautious step into the passage, then another. The air grew colder as he descended, the scent stronger. 20 steps down, the passageway leveled out into a small chamber. His flashlight beam caught what looked like primitive artwork on the walls, stick figures gathered around a large, central shape that might have been the tree above. Daniel moved closer to examine the drawings. They seemed to tell a story. First, the figures standing around the tree, then the same figures beneath it, then something emerging from the tree, something large with too many limbs. And finally the figures changed, their bodies elongated and distorted. A soft sound behind him made Daniel whirl around. The door at the top of the stairs had swung shut. Panic flooded through him as he bounded up the steps, pushing against the door with all his strength. It didn't budge. He pounded on it, shouting for help, even though he knew no one was likely to hear him this deep in the forest. When his voice grew hoarse and his hands ached from pounding, Daniel forced himself to calm down. There had to be another way out. He returned to the chamber, methodically examining every inch of the walls with his flashlight. That's when he noticed the tunnel. It was small, barely visible behind a curtain of hanging roots, but it was definitely there, a passage leading deeper still. With no other options, Daniel got down on his hands and knees and crawled into it. The tunnel twisted and turned, sometimes so narrow that he had to squeeze through sideways. The air became increasingly stale, making each breath a labor, just as claustrophobia threatened to overwhelm him. The passage widened into another chamber, this one much larger than the first. Daniel's flashlight couldn't reach the far walls or ceiling, but what it did illuminate froze the blood in his veins. The chamber floor was covered with objects: clothes, shoes, backpacks, camping gear, cameras much like his own, all in various states of decay. Some items looked decades old, others relatively new. A camping lantern from the 1970s sat beside a smartphone in a waterproof case that couldn't be more than a year old. These were the belongings of the missing, all those hikers and campers who had vanished in Blackwood Forest over the years. As the realization dawned on him, Daniel heard it. A soft, rhythmic sound coming from the darkness beyond his flashlight's reach. A sound like breathing, but wrong somehow, too wet and ragged. His hand shaking, Daniel directed the beam toward the noise. At first, he couldn't comprehend what he was seeing. It appeared to be a massive tangle of roots and vines, pulsating slightly as if alive. Then he saw the faces, human faces embedded in the writhing mass, their features stretched and distorted, but still recognizable as people. Some had their eyes closed as if sleeping, others stared blankly, and a few, the most recently taken, he presumed, looked at him with conscious awareness and silent pleas in their eyes. One face near the edge of the mass turned toward his light. The man's mouth worked soundlessly for a moment before finding its voice. "Run," the face whispered, its voice like dry leaves rustling. "It's still hungry." The mass pulsed more rapidly, and Daniel saw movement at its center, something shifting and awakening. Roots and tendrils began to extend toward him with deliberate purpose. Daniel didn't need to be told twice. He scrambled back toward the tunnel, his only thought to put as much distance as possible between himself and the abomination in the chamber. He crawled frantically, scraping his hands and knees raw on the rough earth, not caring about the pain. Behind him, he could hear something slithering through the tunnel in pursuit. When he reached the first chamber, he found to his horror that the stairs were gone, replaced by a smooth, featureless wall of packed earth. He was trapped. The slithering sound grew louder. From the tunnel emerged a thick, ropey tendril, plant-like, but moving with animal purpose. It probed the air as if sensing his presence, then shot toward him with terrifying speed. Daniel dodged, but in the confined space there was nowhere to go. The tendril wrapped around his ankle, its surface covered in tiny thorn-like protrusions that dug into his flesh. He screamed as it began to drag him back toward the tunnel. In desperation, he grabbed his hunting knife from his belt and hacked at the tendril. A shriek that sounded impossibly human echoed through the chamber as the severed end writhed and leaked a viscous, sap-like fluid. The grip on his ankle loosened enough for him to pull free. But more tendrils were emerging now, thicker and faster than the first. The walls of the chamber themselves seemed to be coming alive, the packed earth giving way to reveal a fibrous organic material. Beneath that pulsed and shifted. Daniel pressed himself against the only section of wall that remained unchanged, his mind racing for a solution. His flashlight beam caught something he hadn't noticed before. A small, circular carving, similar to the door above, hidden in a crevice near the floor. With the tendrils converging on him from all sides, Daniel lunged for the carving, his fingers scrabbling for any kind of hold. He found a small depression, and pressed it with all his strength. The wall behind him gave way, and he tumbled backward into open air. He landed hard on damp forest floor, gasping and disoriented. Above him, the night sky was visible through a canopy of leaves. Somehow, impossibly, he was back in the forest, but not near the giant oak. He seemed to be in a different section entirely. Daniel struggled to his feet, wincing at the pain in his ankle where the tendril had gripped him. His clothes were torn and filthy, his equipment gone except for the knife still clutched in his trembling hand. He had no idea which direction would lead him out of the forest, but he knew he had to move. As he limped forward, he heard it, the soft, whispering sound of leaves rustling in the breeze. Except there was no breeze. The forest was perfectly still. The whispers grew louder, forming words in dozens of overlapping voices. Stay with us. Become part of us. Feed us. Daniel broke into a run, ignoring the pain shooting through his leg. The whispers followed, accompanied now by the creaking of wood and the soft sound of things moving through the underbrush. The trees themselves seemed to bend toward him as he passed, branches reaching like grasping hands. He ran until his lungs burned and his legs threatened to give out. Just when he thought he couldn't go any farther, he saw lights ahead, the main road. With a final burst of desperate energy, he sprinted toward them. As he broke free of the tree line, the whispers rose to a fevered pitch before abruptly cutting off. Daniel collapsed on the roadside, a passing car slowing at the sight of him. The official report would later state that Daniel Matthews suffered an accident while hiking, becoming disoriented and injuring himself in a fall. The hallucinations and fantastical story were attributed to dehydration and the onset of hypothermia. No one believed his warnings about what lurked beneath the ancient oak, but Daniel knew the truth. He knew why his hair had turned prematurely white overnight, why he couldn't bear to touch or even look at plants anymore, why he woke up screaming when he felt the sheets tangled around his ankles. And he knew, with terrible certainty, that the thing beneath Blackwood Forest was still there, still hungry, and still waiting. Because sometimes, in the dead of night, he could hear the whispers again, coming from the potted plant by his bedroom window, from the vines creeping up the side of his apartment building, from every blade of grass and every leaf. We found you. We're coming for you. We will feed. Sometimes, he looks at his ankle where the tendril grabbed him and thinks he sees something green moving beneath his skin. And he wonders how long he has before he too becomes part of what lurks below.